top tips on the scales of the Thermomix. Now, the TM6 scales measure in 1 gram increments, so it's quite exact, whereas some of the previous models, they only measured in 5 grams, so we can get really light ingredients done in this. But there's a few things like best practice things and things that we can do to make sure the scales stay calibrated and don't have to go in for a service check. Just on that note, if you are finding that the scales are incorrect for any reason, it may need to go for a trip to the service centre, which is within Australia. It doesn't have to go back to Germany, and they will fix it, recalibrate it, and send it back, even if it's out of warranty. So let me know if you need any help with that, or the service centre is 1-800-004-838, and they will help you out. Now, the very first tip or rule is do not drag the Thermomix across the surface. So if you need to move it from its position, you need to clean around it, you pick it up and you move it with one hand on the back and one hand on the front. And now the main reason that is that the scales are attached to the feet in the bottom there. So you can see one at the front and two at the back. Now, they're part of the scales system. So if that is dragged across the bench, and you'll hear the noise, I've heard it many times, it makes a noise. If you can hear someone else doing it, you know that it's being dragged across the surface and not picked up and moved, and that can throw the scales out. And it may not happen if it's done one time, but if it's done many times, it may need to go back and get calibrated, and nobody wants to be without their Thermomix once they start getting into using it. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is don't bang metal, especially on the side of the bowl. So, and mainly when it's in position, because you can imagine the force of a metal spoon banging against the bowl. If you're putting something in that's not coming off the spoon, use the spatula to scrape it from the spoon or whatever it is into the mixing bowl. Don't bang it. The spatula is okay. I like to wipe it and then scrape it and hit it in, and you can hit it lightly with the spatula, but metal especially, definitely don't bang it against it. When the bowl is out of position, it's not going to damage the bowl. It's more about the scales that you don't want to do that for. Now, did you know that you can use the Thermomix as regular kitchen scales? So you don't have to be putting something inside the bowl to get the weight measurement. You can actually use it in a lot of different ways. One way I like to use it sometimes is if you take a bowl, and you can even put the bowl there, and then you hit the scales on, and it starts with 0. You just always check that it's on 0, how you want it before starting. Then you can add things into the bowl and you get your reading that way. Another way is you can have the bowl in place, got the basket in there. Sometimes I use the basket. Then you just tear the scales and you can add things into the basket, especially if they're going to end up in the basket anyway. That's a good idea to do it. Saves you washing up with a bowl or something extra. And the other way, you can even do it with something on top of the lid here. So if you've got something in the bowl and the bowl's into position, you can use something else on top. Again, regular kitchen scales, you just tear it and there. So you can get rid of your kitchen scales as well as a bunch of other appliances, as you know. So there's a multitude of ways to use the scales. The next one is testing your scales. If you're a little bit unsure if the scales are correct or something has made you guess them, there is many ways that things could be affecting the scales. And 9 times out of 10, it is just simply that something is simply leaning on the Thermomix. Because the scales are so exact, this could be as simple as making sure the cord is fully extended from the back. First of all, you'll see a little red bit of tape that'll tell you that you've got it all the way out, that the cord's not leaning on the Thermomix itself on the side, that anything else is not touching the Thermomix, because that will, you probably can't see those readings there, but if I was just take that basket away, that changed the scales. So just make sure there's nothing around it touching it and it's on a clean, even surface, that it's not, sometimes if you pick up and move the Thermomix, just make sure it's not sitting on the cord, part of the cord as well. Now, another thing is if you have your hand on the machine as well, when you hit the tare, when you remove your hand or move it, that's going to affect it as well. And if you are pouring something in, this is a good one to remind kids, if you're pouring, say, milk or water or something from a bottle in, don't lean it against the outside of the mixing bowl, because that will also affect the reading and it will be jumping all over the place, and then you may not be able to know how much you've put in and already, and it'll leave you guessing the amounts, which you could take out, tear and start again. And if you're still guessing the scale's effectiveness after all of that, you can test the scales. Oh, there's one more thing before you test the scales. It is to clean the feet. Sometimes there is crumbs and stuff that are stuck to the bottom of the feet here on those black parts I showed you before. Simply just get a damp cloth and give them a wipe. And that can also, even though that's something so small, it does make a difference. So that's the number one go-to as well. But a few tests that you can do to make sure whether your scales are out or they're okay is to measure some things. So 1 liter of water, this could be in a like a measuring jug, or you could pour it into the Thermomix. So you can fill this up to 1 liter and then hit the tare scales, make them 0. Pour in the liter, it should be 1 kilo. 1 liter of liquid equals 1 kilo. So any liquid should be gram for mil. So if you are using 500 grams of milk, it's going to be 500 mils. Keeping that in mind. The other things you can use to weigh is a known weight item, such as a kilo bag of flour or rice. And the last thing you can do to check is weigh your measuring cup. So your measuring cup, if you put the scales on 0 and you put your measuring cup, this TM6 only, the other ones weigh a bit different, it should be 85 grams. Now, give or take a gram or 2 either side, it should be, your measuring cup should weigh 85 grams for the TM6 model. Don't stress if you are a gram or 2 out either side, but it will be pretty much exact within a gram or 2 either side. And that's all my tips on the scales. Hope that's helpful.